Welcome to Recovery Uncovered, brought to you by Whiskey and Milk. I'm Adam Clark.
I'm Sarah Sellers.
As recovering addicts, we're on a mission to fight the stigma against addiction.
And inspire those struggling by sharing the experience of real people in recovery.
Because addiction doesn't discriminate.
Behind every struggle, there's a person with a story.
This is Recovery Uncovered.
Attention, now arriving at your destination. The last house on the block.
Welcome back to Recovery Uncovered, episode 5. Just going to have me and Sarah today. We're going to be diving into our recovery stories a little bit deeper, focusing more on the sobriety side, what we did to get sober, what life's been like since then, as opposed to the kind of drunk-a-log that you got the first go-around with just the two of us. So I hope everybody's ready.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. You sounded like a pre-recording at the very beginning.
Just
scared
came
me
off
a
the
little.
top.
Yeah.
God gave me that one.
Love it. So you going first?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I feel like we touched on your recovery the first episode, but I don't feel like I even really know what that very last moment was for you. And then if you decided then you were going to do whatever it takes to get sober, or what was your conception of getting sober?
So like up until a day or two before I went to rehab, I wasn't ready to get sober. I didn't want to get sober. And even into going to rehab, like I knew I wanted to get off the heroin. I wanted to get off the painkillers, but I didn't have the idea that like I want to go stone cold sober. I thought that was kind of freaking lame at that point in my life. But basically what happened is, at that point I had been doing heroin for like 6 or 7 months. I didn't last long on it. The painkillers I managed I say.
Right.
But I managed for 2 or 3 years before I switched to the heroin. And I kind of talked about what that was like on our first episode. But basically, the first time I did it, I spent $20. It was the best high I'd ever had, and that $20 worth lasted me 3 days. 7 months later, I was spending $200 a day, stealing at least $100 a day from my grandmother to support the habit or the addiction, and I was just miserable. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't do anything without it. I couldn't wake up in the morning. I couldn't go to sleep without it. I couldn't go to work. Like my whole life had got to the point where it revolved around like, I got to get money so I can get dope, and I do the dope so I can get some more money. And it was just this brutal, endless cycle. And so I'd got caught once stealing from my grandmother already. My dad busted me, and we actually went to a bar where we were talking about it. And, he kind of like laid out the proof in front of me, and he kind of, fed me the excuse. Like, I don't think he wanted to believe that I was as bad as I was, or that the situation was what it was. But I ended up telling him that, well, let me back up. The girl I was dating at the time, her family was very well off. Both parents were doctors, owned multiple medical clinics, they had money. And so my excuse was I just feel so insignificant compared to her and her family. So that's why I was taking the money, so I could show her the life that she was accustomed to, or some bullshit like that.
Okay. Did you believe that a little bit?
No, I didn't believe it at all, because I was spending all that money on dope.
Right.
But when I was talking to him, he asked me that. He was like, "What are you just trying to impress your girlfriend?" And I was like, "Oh, that's it right there. I'm going to run with that lie."
Yeah.
And so that's what I told him. And I don't know if he believed me or not, but he at least bought it enough to kind of get me off the hook there, swore that I was never going to steal from her again. And then the next day I was back to taking money from her. I would go to her house, and from the outward appearances, if you weren't looking close enough, it looked like, man, Adam's doing a whole lot, ever since my granddad died, he's over there taking care of his grandmother. He's going and getting her groceries, taking her to appointments. And I was doing all those things, but I'd go to Kroger and get her $50 worth of groceries and get $200 cash back.
Right.
And so, I got caught again. And this time there was no talking my way out of it. My dad was out of town. And so he called my mom and my stepdad, and like, they don't talk to each other. They're not cool. They're not friends. Like, I guess it's been cordial for the most part, their interactions. But like when they're talking and they're on a team against me, like some shit's gone down.
Yeah.
And so I get a call from my mom and my stepdad, and it's not a question of what I'm doing. It's just, hey, we're coming to your house to pick up your grandmother's debit card. I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And so they come pick it up, and I tell them, like, I don't even know what I tell them at that time. Like, I was high then. And I told them I had to go to work, which I did, but I had to go to the dope man first. So I did that, went to work, and they're like, we need you to come over and talk to us when you get off work. And I got off at like my normal time at where the restaurant I was at, I don't know, 10:30, whatever. But I just told them like, oh, I'm still not off. And eventually it got past midnight, and I didn't go over there. And I remember going to see the dope man after I got off work, and I texted dude, and then I got a text from my dad that just said, don't. And so like he was looking at my messages. I don't know if it was through the Verizon account or what happened, but like he knew as soon as I text dude to go pick up.
If only that man didn't have an iPhone.
He didn't. He had an Android.
Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm still not 100% sure how that happened.
So there's like a procedure that happens when you I got really used to the procedure of getting in trouble, coming up with something, getting them off my back, and then doing well for a little while. And then, then the procedure would happen again. And it's almost like Sergeant would come out in me. And I'm like, all right, I got to do my job. I got to cry, probably. I need to fake cry. To be really emotional about it. And when my parents would break that procedure, it really did shake me up a little bit, and then in some moments I got better at what I was doing. There were some moments though, and I mean shake up the procedure by like a perfect example. He's texting you, don't. I'm sure that sounds like it was new.
Yeah, and that had never happened.
Yeah. And when they did that, make some drastic change in the way that they were approaching me, making it more serious, I had two choices. Like, I can fess up, I can feel the real impact of I'm in trouble and this is not right, or I can get better at lying.
Mm-hmm.
I can build it up better. I'm like, all right, this is my showtime. This is big. So I'm like listening to this, I'm thinking that procedure is definitely just changing for you.
Yeah, I could no longer talk my way out of it at that point.
Yeah.
And so, he sent me that message that said, don't. But like, I was hopelessly addicted. Like, I had to get something in my system. So I did what any addict does. I downloaded Text Now and got a new number and texted
you got better.
The dope man.
You didn't fess up.
Yep.
You got better.
Not yet.
Yep.
And, I went and I don't even know if I got it that night or if I ended up getting some the next morning. But like, I bought dope one more time. And then same thing, I went to work that next night. My parents are like, we don't care what time it is. You're coming over to talk to us when you get off work. And so, like, I was miserable already. I didn't go to their house with the intention of, like, fessing up, or I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I kind of already felt like I was at the end of my rope. I felt hopeless. I was talking to some guys about it last night, like, if there was a moment where you realized that, like, that I was an addict. And that moment had happened multiple years before that. And I remember being at this house that I lived at, and sorry, I'm parched. Being at this house that I lived at, and then just like sitting there and having the realization that this was as good as my life was going to get. Like, I'm a pill junkie, I'm a bartender, I'm dating this girl who's like sort of going to hair school, but also kind of failing out. And like, that was it. I had reached my peak. And I'd always grown up as a dreamer, a big goal setter, and thought that I had, all these things that I was going to achieve, these big ambitions. And I just remember feeling like, all right, this is my life now. And so that second night when they told me that I had to come to their house, I just came. And they set me down in the living room, and we had some really awkward small talk at first, like, how you been? Like, I don't remember but I was just like, this is weird. Like, we all know what's happening here.
Yeah.
And they asked me, like, what's going on? And I just kind of blurted it out, like, I'm doing heroin. And I wish I, like, could have recorded the look on my parents' face.
Breaking procedure?
Yeah.
And you fess up this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I finally got honest for the first time in many years.
Yeah.
And, after the initial shock, I don't remember the whole details of the conversation, but they just asked me, like, do you want help? I said, yes. And so that's where, like, that's the moment where my whole life started to change. My stepdad started looking into treatment centers local to me. I gave him my keys, staying with y'all, not going back to my girlfriend's house. Had to call my girlfriend and tell her, because she didn't know. She knew that I had used to have a pill problem, because that's what I told her when we started dating, because everybody at work was like, Adam's a pill junkie. And I was like, oh, no, that was old Adam. I'm better now. Yeah. I was not better.
Right.
And, I stayed the night at their house, and the next morning they called my stepsister, who I had no idea was the director of Jackson, Tennessee's anti-drug coalition.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I had no idea what she did for a career. Like, I knew she had a social work degree or something like that. And that was the extent of it. But she connected me with this lady, Diane, who, fingers crossed, we'll have as a guest here sooner than later. And Diane came over, and Diane's in recovery. It's got to be like 20-something years now. She was a meth addict, and she sat down and talked to me and kind of shared some of her story, showed me pictures of her last mugshot. And as we both know, like, another alcoholic or an addict can connect with an alcoholic or an addict like nobody else can. When my parents told me, like, quit drinking, quit doing drugs, I'm like, blah, 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 lame. But I could tell that she knew how I felt. And, I had become willing at that point. I'd found a moment of clarity. And so she started reaching out to see where we could get me in treatment. And man, God just started showing up big. Like, she called this treatment center, and she may have called a couple ones first, but she called this one in Scurry, Texas. It was called the Tree House. And she was like, I think this place is perfect for you. I'm going to see if we can get you a bed. So she makes a couple calls. They get me a bed. And then they're like, all right, we need to send over your insurance. And I was still on my parents' insurance at this point. So, like, I still had that. I was 25.
It's real lucky.
Well, sort of, because they didn't take it.
Oh.
Yeah, none of it would have been covered. And so she made some other calls, and they got it scholarshiped.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I found out later we got the receipt. It wasn't really a bill because it was paid for, but it was $52,000 that was just covered.
Wow.
And then, my parents got me a plane ticket, and I detoxed in my mom's house for 24, 48 hours before I was on a plane to Scurry, Texas. And all of a sudden, I'd got honest. 48 hours later, I'm in the back of the druggie buggy that they picked me up in at the Dallas airport to take me to Scurry.
Yeah.
Just a little middle of nowhere, nothing town. When the treatment center was fully staffed and all the beds were full, it doubled the population of the town.
Okay, I have a theory about this, though.
Yeah.
I think the best treatment centers are in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I couldn't escape.
And then the best recovery communities are in the middle of the biggest drinking towns ever.
True. Because, where are you going to find the most alcoholics and addicts?
Exactly. You would think the opposite for both things, but it's so true.
But I think it's good that I wasn't in my hometown. There's good treatment
Absolutely.
centers in Jackson, Tennessee, and I have several friends who have gotten sober there. But I remember being a couple days into treatment, going for a walk with one of the dudes I'd made friends with, and like having the thought cross my mind, like if I could get a hold of my guy somehow, if he knew somebody down here and they had a drone, that he could airdrop me in some dope. Like, I was crazy.
I had a girl in my adolescent treatment. She got on that email. She emailed her drug dealer, which I don't know how like she got that email, but she had him drive to our treatment center and try to drop something off.
Wild.
Somehow that master plan didn't work out. I don't remember how, but
I'm just mystified that she had her drug dealer's email.
I know.
I didn't even know mine's real name. Only one of them I knew their actual name.
I mean, you could go through some stuff to find the person that you need.
True. I've gone to some crazy extents.
Yeah.
But that treatment center changed my life. I did some detox there, and the first handful of days they had me on a Suboxone taper to control the withdrawals. So I did that for like 5 days to kind of get normalized and my body just regulated, I guess. And I started doing intense therapy. And the thing that was really cool about the treehouse, it was heavily trauma focused. And I got a lot of childhood trauma in my story, sexual abuse at age 7, or maybe it was a little later, 8 or 9. But my parents divorced at 7. And then my dad and his second wife, who was first his secretary, they were both in active alcoholism and addiction when I was at their house. And so they would be yelling, screaming, fighting at each other. Like, I never really got yelled or cursed at too much. I never had hands laid on me. But I remember as a kid, like, laying in bed, holding my little brother, crying myself to sleep because I was afraid.
Yeah.
And I never talked about that. I had never unpacked any of that. And so I got to unpack that with therapists and with other people in recovery who worked at the treatment center. And like getting a lot of that out of my system really opened me up to, I guess, being willing to see like, I have to take responsibility for all of my actions, but the way I was raised, the way I was brought up, the things I experienced, like that wasn't all my fault. And a lot of that shaped the way that I acted. It shaped how I dealt with negative feelings. Yeah. I would just push everything into this little black box deep inside me and lock the key and throw that sumbitch away. Yeah. Like I didn't want to deal with any feelings that were at all negative. And it made me very averse to confrontation, which I still am to a degree. Not nearly as bad as I used to be. But that treatment center changed my life. And coming out of there, I did 28 days. And then I did intensive outpatient treatment for, I think, 6 weeks at a Cumberland Heights satellite campus in Jackson, Tennessee.
Shout out. Yeah.
Cumberland
I love
Heights.
Cumberland Heights. Yeah.
Appreciate you guys. And, I moved back into a really structured environment. Lots of people do sober living, but I moved in with my mom and my stepdad. And, they had Life 360 on my phone. And my girlfriend had Life 360 on my phone.
Okay. Wait, so you made it with your relationship?
Well, for a little bit.
Okay.
We broke up
Same.
the night that I went to treatment. But then, 2 days later, she rode with us to the airport to, take
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm not kissing you, but I'll give you a hug.
Yeah.
And then, when I wrote
Did
her
y'all
some
mail
letters,
back and forth? Okay, yeah, me too.
I wrote her letters. And then when I got phone privileges, I finally called her. I waited a couple days, actually. I called my mom and some other people first because I just didn't know what the hell to say. Yeah, our whole relationship's been a lie. I've been lying to you the whole time. I kind of suck.
Yeah. Did you have time to go over that with your therapist and inpatient?
The girlfriend situation?
Yeah.
I don't know how much we talked about that. We did some.
Yeah. I know it's hard to remember that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I know I talked to it, I definitely talked about it some with my therapist because I had the trauma therapist that I went to, a regular therapist, and then we had groups, all day long that was a lot of talk therapy. I did CBT, DBT, a bunch of different types of therapy. And so I definitely discussed it, but I don't know that I really had a game plan, but I did love her,
Yeah.
and she obviously loved me. There was still something there, but the trust was gone. And so, you know, we got back together when I got out of treatment, and it lasted for a while, but it was never the same. Like, she was never able to trust me the same again. That was the worst amends I ever tried to make in my amends process.
Are we supposed to do? Okay.
Oh, well.
Are we supposed to do that?
I was.
I'm kidding.
I needed to.
I'm kidding.
But yeah, I like asked her, you know, what I could do to make things right. And she was like, probably nothing. I was like, oh, good.
Nothing as in like, don't speak to me anymore, or just like, you're good?
No, nothing like there's probably nothing you can do to make it right. But then we continued to date.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of have a similar situation like that. And I really, really cared about the guy, but it was so hard to come out of an inpatient experience like that and be off drugs and alcohol for so long. And then I'm looking at this person who knows a different person. And I was like trying to say, I'm not who you think I am. And I don't mean like this new, like recovering person. I mean like that other person, like that was double. I don't remember what you even know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know how, the connection wasn't real for me. You know, it was at least like, does that make sense? Like,
No, I get what you're saying.
The connection was real. It was just, I was putting out something totally different, and I don't remember what I put out.
Completely false front.
False front. It was a false front. And so trying to go back into that relationship was really difficult for me.
Mm-hmm. Like, I think it was doomed to fail from the start for me. Yeah, I mean, like, I had destroyed her trust. I destroyed her self-esteem. Like, I remember being on heroin, like, me and her having sex, and I fall asleep during sex, and I start mumbling about chicken nuggets, and, like, that's what she gets out of our experience there, is it, like, you know, obviously wasn't good enough. He fell asleep, and now he's mumbling about chicken nuggets. Like,
Right.
I can only imagine what that had to do to her self-esteem. And there were so many other, you know, other little situations like that. So, you know, that relationship didn't end up working out in the end. But now, like, we're not, like, super close or anything. But it's one of the only exes that I have that I'll still talk to occasionally. Like, we're friendly. She's still friends with my family. Like, she got really close with my family while I was in treatment.
Same.
Yeah. Yeah, like her and my mom still text and
How
stuff.
do we have such a similar situation?
I don't know.
Well, since we do, I just want to disclaim that relationships can work through treatment.
They're not all doomed.
We just happen to be the percentage of those that don't.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of respect for couples that make it through something like this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of respect. I mean, that's a lot of soul searching and a lot of communication that has to go into it. And I think in both of our cases, there could have been a different, there could have been a different outcome. But yeah, keep going.
It just wasn't like, we've been dating for like 6 months. Like, we started dating like right after I started doing heroin. So like the whole beginning of it was just fake. And then trying to recover from that, it's not the same as like somebody who's been married or been in a very long-term relationship prior to treatment.
Well, it's rough when, you know, I'm thinking, you know, I remember one time he was asking me, what's wrong with you? And I was detoxing from something that I couldn't get. And so I'm like withdrawing, you know, and I'm like shaking, and I'm like, I'm just so sad, you know, like my emotions are really just all over the place, you know?
Yeah.
And having like this intimate moment, but the reason I'm sad is totally different.
Yeah, it's all fake.
Yeah. I've been taking bars and I can't find any right now.
I'm dead.
So I don't know. That was tough to come out of that. But so for you, what was it like with your inner circle, or if you had one? No judgment if you didn't have friends towards the end. I'm on that train. But But for the people that you knew when you came back from treatment, did you have an easy time still hanging out with
Cut
people?
them all off.
Oh.
Every single one of them.
No, really?
Yeah, all of them.
Were you sad about it?
Not even really. There's a couple of them that I've like reconnected with and that I've talked to occasionally. But I got my phone from my counselor in treatment. We couldn't have phones the whole time. But I told her, I was like, I want to go clear out numbers out of my phone. And I deleted like 250 phone numbers of people I drank with, people I got high with, people I bought drugs from, like all of them. And I just disappeared, straight ghosted all of them. And
God, I had such a different response.
I don't know that that's the right move for everybody, but I feel like
It
was
is the right move for me. It would have been the right move.
Yeah. Which,
Wow.
like, at that time, I had already isolated a lot. Like,
Right.
I don't know, 4 people knew I was doing heroin, 3 dealers, and 1 dude I sold to. Like, and that was it.
Yeah. See, I didn't do heroin. So I remember asking someone in my adult outpatient, I was like, so like you and your buddies, when y'all would do heroin, and he was like, wait, you don't hang out with people and do heroin.
Yeah, you just melt into whatever piece of furniture you're sitting on.
Right.
Or wreck your car going down I-40.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah. Solo.
Yeah, but like I completely got rid of that community. I had one friend who had been through treatment and has kind of been on and off with sobriety. And so I hung out with him a little bit. We went to a couple meetings. And then one time he came over to hang out and he brought like 2 Budweisers and a blunt. And I'm like, this ain't it, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
I remember going to hang out because my girlfriend, like, we worked at the same restaurant. We were in the same friend group. And I remember going to hang out.
I'm sorry, did you go back to that job?
Oh, no.
I'm curious.
No,
okay,
no, no.
all right.
No, the morning that I left for rehab, I called my boss, and he was super, super cool dude. Still a really good guy. And I called him. I'm like, hey, Ian, I'm not going to be in for my shift today. And he's like, okay, what's going on, man? I'm like, I'm going to rehab. And he was like, thank God. So, like, everybody knew.
Yeah.
I thought that I had everyone fooled, but everybody knew. And, you know, I had to find a new group of friends. Like, what I was saying is I went to hang out with some old friends with my girlfriend at the time. And she was, like, prefacing them, like, hey, you know, Adam's sober now. And then one of my friends that she was talking to was like, wait, Adam doesn't drink anymore? And she was like, no, that's what sober means. He's like, so he doesn't even smoke weed? He's like, no, he's sober. He's like, well, what the fuck does he do then?
Yeah.
Like, because that was my whole identity, my whole personality.
Well, and like that was my whole friend group.
Yeah, all
like
of mine.
it was there. Sober is not a thing. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just weird.
Yeah.
To not be drinking on the weekends or smoking during the day. Like it's almost unheard of. Like
yeah.
It's you know, if you're going to be in that group, but like if you're, you know, someone else, like then you're labeled as you don't do fun things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that at least that's how I labeled people. I was
100%.
like, you're just simply boring.
Yeah, you're lame.
You're lame.
Like you just don't know what you're missing out on. And that's who I'd surrounded myself with.
Right.
I had already pushed away all of my good friends. Like I got a friend who our parents were best friends when we were born. So literally have known each other since we were born. And he's one of the people I'm still friends with, but he never did any of the stuff that I was doing. Like I'd already pushed him out of my life. We talked occasionally, like a little bit, but I hadn't been talking to him for years. The people that I went to high school with who were good friends, good influence, like I'd pushed them away.
Yes.
And so I had to find a whole new friend group.
50 to 100 people right now, and I won't do it. Because I think, and I would do it if I could remember like every single one of them, because I wouldn't want to leave one out. But how many people I wish I was friends with in high school, and
Absolutely.
like how many people I wish I had been around and asked and just hung out with. Because I like looking back, I'm like, you were a really resilient kid.
Yeah, and then now it's interesting, like because I'm friends with a lot of those people on Facebook, and like
yes.
Seeing what some of them are doing with their lives, I'm like, dude, you're killing it.
I know.
Like, why was I not hanging out with you? Like, I didn't think that you were cool at the time. And now
Right.
you're absolutely killing life.
Yes. Yeah. Shout out to those people. I don't know if they're gonna. You don't know who you are,
Yeah.
but you know who you are.
You may see it.
Especially the ones that didn't like me. You're probably the best ones.
Yeah, probably.
You're probably doing the best.
But I had to find a whole new friend group. You know, I found other people in recovery. You know, it was suggested of me when I got sober to find recovery meetings and hit 90 of them in 90 days.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I did more than 90. And very quickly I found a community of people who loved me for where I was at, were just happy that I was there and that I was sober, and had found a way to live without drugs and alcohol and have a happy existence still. Because that's something that I didn't think was possible coming into treatment. Like, at some point in treatment, I realized, like, okay, I can live sober, but I thought it was going to be lame.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think that there was going to be any fun left. And I started doing stuff with people that I would have called lame, doing activities that I would have called lame, having a great damn time. You know, going to Perkins at 10 o'clock and stay until 2 a.m, shooting the shit, telling old stories, talking about recovery, laughing my ass off, you know. And I hadn't had genuine joy and laughter in a long time.
Yeah.
Like, I had to have been high or tripping on something or on Molly or like some sort of chemical influence to feel that kind of joy. And I started feeling that kind of joy in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and it was hard at times, like early sobriety. It wasn't all just pink cloud for me, but I had, like I said, I had a really good support system. Like, my parents were drug testing me, and I started building a relationship with them again, which I started to like.
Yeah.
You know, they were the people that I would have classified as lame for a long time because they didn't live the way that I was wanting to live, and they didn't condone that way of living. You know, there's been ups and downs in my recovery since that point. Like, the first year was kind of easy. There wasn't a whole lot that went down that was just crazy. And then, you know, year 2, like, stuff started happening with family relationships. You know, I had 5 different therapists that I went to tell me I needed to cut off my father. And it's because he's one of us. And I still don't speak to him, but I've been told in the last couple weeks by people in the recovery community I know that he's sober and doing well. So, you know, at this point, there's potential for a reconnection there that I didn't know if ever was possible. But we started having issues where, like, I had to call the police on him like 7 times in like a 1.5 year period. I had to put him, like, lock him up for suicide watch 2 different times. And that was something that, like, I mean, I hope nobody ever has to deal with. Nobody should ever have to deal with. But those are things that I absolutely would have drank or gotten high over. That because of the support, because of the lessons that I learned, and because of the spiritual connection that I'd formed with God, like, I was able to walk through that and be okay.
Yeah.
And I was able to, like, have a crazy night where I had to call the police on him and this or that happened. And then, like, the next day be cutting up about it. Like, dude, some crazy shit happened to me last night, and still be able to experience joy.
Yeah.
You know, I went through a breakup with that girl who, like, at a certain point I thought I was going to marry. And my family did too. Like, she's still in some family pictures that my mom has at the house.
Yeah.
But through those ups and downs, like, I learned that there's certain things that I needed to do for my recovery to stay sober. You know, I need to be in some form of recovery community. And you can find that in a lot of different places. Some people find it in 12-step meetings. Some people find it in church. Some people find it in therapy groups. Like, there's all sorts of ways to find it. But I found that community for me is really, really important.
Yeah.
And I found that my spiritual connection with my Creator is really, really important for me. You know, I'd grown up religious. I'd grown up in the church. Like, one granddad was a preacher. The other was a deacon in the Baptist church. We were in church every time the doors were open. And I was heavily involved. And then I'd completely turned away from it in my drinking and using. And so I found a connection with God again that I was able to lean on in those tough times. And I started making it through these tough experiences and then being able to look back and see that, man, God carried me through something that I didn't know that I'd be able to get through. If you had laid that situation out in front of me first and been like, hey, you're about to go through some shit, Adam, this is what it looks like, I would have told you I couldn't. But I began to be able to look back at those and start having more faith. Mm-hmm. And, that improved my life. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but like over the years, there's been those ups and downs. I've gone through multiple different jobs in recovery. Every single one of them God just laid in my lap, I feel like. Like when I was in treatment, I applied for 230 something jobs and didn't get a call back. And then from somebody I met in recovery, I got my first job. And then the second job I had in recovery, I got that from somebody else I knew in recovery. And then the job I have now, I got started with that company because somebody I knew who was also in recovery worked there. My life today is unimaginable compared to what it used to be like. I had all these goals and hopes and dreams when I first got sober, and the majority of them were material related. Like I wanted the nice car, I wanted the house, I wanted the wife, the kids, and I didn't really want much else. But like, I didn't get the wife or the kids yet, but I have a house, I have a car. It's not the most expensive or the nicest one, but it's a nice car. I have a good job that pays me an income that allows me to afford all of my bills and then have access to have some fun on the side. I have relationships built back with my family. Like my mom and my stepdad, there was zero trust when I got out of rehab. And I remember thinking like, I'm 28 days sober, I've changed my whole life. And like, I had to have some people explain to me like, Adam, you screwed around for 7 years before you got sober. Yeah. You lied to them that whole time. Yeah. Like, this one little month ain't shit, bro.
Yeah.
You're going to have a track record of doing the right thing. And over time, I've been able to build that trust back with them and, like make amends to my parents through not behaving the way that Adam used to behave, by not lying to them. It's funny now if you come to like when I go home to family dinner at my parents' house, because they always hear some wild shit that I did. Inevitably, like something will spark an old memory and I'll be like, oh yeah, like that was the time that I was trying to snort a line of heroin going down I-40 and ran into a Dodge Ram 3500 dually and should have died.
How do we have time for all of this?
I had so much.
Like, I don't know why I'm still remembering things now. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, like, how do you get the time to cover this much ground?
There's so much.
It's wild. It's just the disease is like accelerated, and insanity is such a huge part of alcoholism and addiction itself because none of it makes sense.
No, none of my behaviors for years on end, like it was just insanity. And it was just like, I would do whatever I had to do, whatever I needed to do to get the next fix. Because at the root cause of it, like, I just didn't like the way I felt. I felt different from a young age. I never felt like I fit in. And when I started using drugs and alcohol, I felt normal. Like, don't get me wrong, I got messed up. But there was always a certain point, like when I would start to drink or when I would start to use, where it was like, and I felt like what everybody else felt at their natural state. Like there was something that was missing from me, and drugs and alcohol gave me what normal people already had. And like the lengths that I went to chase that escape, crossed lines that I never thought I would cross. I used to joke, like before I started doing painkillers and stuff, like, yeah, I'm gonna do heroin on my 80th birthday. Like, ha 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 ha, you're 80 then, who cares if it kills me? And then I started at like 24.
Yeah.
And, like that's something as a kid, if you've been like, yeah, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wouldn't have said heroin addict, I
Yeah.
would have said I would never do that. Like I may drink and smoke weed, but I'm not going to do cocaine. I'm not going to do acid, mushrooms, Molly, Adderall, Xanax, like the list of substances that I did regularly. Not stuff
Yeah.
like, I don't think I ever did a drug and just tried it once and was like, meh. Even the drugs that I didn't like as much, if it was there, I was going to
Even
do
the
it.
ones that had me on someone's bedroom floor, like rocking back and forth, unable to
Yeah.
breathe. Those I was like, I'll just do it a different way.
Yeah, I took too much. Like there was always some rationalization to it.
Yes.
But it's just crazy how different my life is today from how it
Absolutely.
was back then. Like looking back on it, I know that was me. Like Adam was the person who did all those things. Like I stole from my grandmother who had dementia. But like it feels like a completely different person.
Yeah.
Like there's almost like a disconnect in my mind because I'm so far from that person today that it's like, I don't know, it's just wow. You know? But the cool thing about that too is I've been able to right so many of those wrongs. Like before my grandmother passed, I paid her back every penny I stole from her and then some.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Her property taxes hadn't been paid in multiple years. I paid all of her property taxes.
Wow.
Like she wouldn't just straight up take money from me. So I just found ways to give her money.
Wow.
She'd send me to the grocery store. Like, I'm not taking your card. I'm going to use mine and I'm going to buy you groceries. Her vacuum broke. I bought her a really expensive new Dyson ball that was lightweight. It was easier for her to push.
Wow.
And it was so cool how God gave me just enough money to do what I needed to do. And the more responsible I was with it, it was like the more money would come in. I was able to get out of all the debt that I had gotten into during that time.
Yeah.
I remember, I think I shared on it on the last podcast, but I remember telling debt collectors like, yeah, I'm a heroin addict and I just got out of treatment. This is what I can pay. And they would set me up on like a $10 a month payment plan. But then a couple months later, I'd call them back and be like, I have everything that I owe. This is what I'm going to pay and pay it off. And like, it got exciting. Like, holy shit, I'm doing this. Like, I would text my family, like, just paid off another bill, just paid off a student loan, just did this for my grandmother. And like, I began to feel proud of myself.
What you're saying right now is so relevant to me as well, in terms of, doing it the first time, maybe like making an amends to someone or, just anything that we don't want to do in recovery. It's like pulling teeth the first few times.
Yeah.
And then when I started to feel relief from it, I made amends to a girl who I really had a resentment against for years. Like, could not stand her name. The minute I sent that amends to her, it felt like I had found freedom.
Yeah.
And I can talk about her now. I can wish her well. Like, I could see her at Kroger tonight. I'm not going Kroger, but I could see
But it
her
would be fine.
anywhere and it would be fine. It would be completely fine.
That's one of the coolest parts about amends to me is like, before getting sober, before starting to make amends, I couldn't look the world in the eye.
Right.
I couldn't look myself in the eye. And now as I've made amends to these people, like, I can look them in the eye again. I know that, yeah, I screwed shit up on a huge level, but I've also done what I needed to do to make it right.
Yeah.
And 99% of the amends I've made, some of them were financial, some of them were just from harms I caused people. But the most frequent response that I get is, I just want you to keep doing what you're doing and stay sober.
Yeah.
And, that's been my living amends to a lot of people. Like my mom. There ain't no telling how much money they forked out for me, how many times I took painkillers from their cabinet, different stuff like that. And like, I never had to, quote, pay them back in any sort of way. But I make a point to almost every day call my mom, because for years she cried herself to sleep at night because she didn't know if I was dead, alive, or in jail.
Yeah.
And so that's part of my amends to her. Like, she should never have to feel that way again.
Yeah.
And like, me and her have the best relationship. I love calling and talking to her. Like, we talk about the family gossip and what's going on and talk about what I'm doing in my life. And, you know, she helps me like brainstorm ideas for the podcast. Like the shirt that I'm wearing, me and her designed that together.
Did you really help with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, when I was visiting last week or 2 weekends ago, like, we sat down at the kitchen with my laptop and brainstormed ideas and like, all right, let's try this font. Let's try that font. Let's go over this.
That's so fun.
Yeah. And so like the amends that's so scary before you go make it is such a rewarding process.
It really
You
is.
get to see the beauty that comes out of it.
Absolutely. And I think it's you know, there is a process for a reason with recovery. We do, you know, we admit that we're powerless first, and then we go into like laying down a spiritual foundation. I don't think I could have gone into amends first.
No.
It took exactly as long as it needed for me. And even still, sometimes the amends of leave them alone is really hard.
It is.
And, you know, the amends of just be kind is really hard.
Those are
You
tough
know?
sometimes.
Those are really hard sometimes.
Well, I mean, what you said's perfect. Like, if you look at how 12-step programs view amends, like, there's a reason it's not until 9.
Right.
Because you need to do some work on you first.
Right.
And change your behaviors and how you are as a person. And then that also gives you some time, because people aren't going to believe you right away. Like,
No.
how many times did you say like, oh, I'm never getting high again, or I'm not doing this again, or, you know, swore off of this behavior or that behavior. And then the next week we were back to doing it, you know?
Yeah.
I got such a track record of like, I can tell a good story, you
Yeah.
know? I can bring the tears on, and part of me actually feels that emotion in the moment. You know, it's not all fake, but I also know in the back of my head, like, once I get out of this situation, I'm back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I'm very aware now that that process does not end
Yeah.
almost ever. It does not end. It's
No.
constant.
Because I still am not perfect.
Right.
You know, I still wrong people. Sometimes I'm talking to somebody and all of a sudden it's like, I just lied.
Yeah.
Like,
I just lied to you.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I did, but I wanted you to think some way about me. And so I said that thing, and that was not the truth.
Yeah.
And it's cool because we get to clean up our side of the street a little bit quicker nowadays.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to let that icky feeling just hang over my head for years at a time. Like, sometimes I let it hang for a little bit. I'm not always 100% quick to go back and right where I've been wrong, but I have a much easier time doing it because it's not a mountain anymore.
Yes.
Like, it's just a little pile that I got to go clean up.
Yeah. I remember that terrified me when I started, you know, looking at recovery and really taking everything very seriously, that one day I would have to make amends for something that I wasn't high while I did. And that was terrifying.
Yeah, you don't have that excuse anymore.
No.
Like, I can't blame it on the dope. Like,
No.
that was just me.
That was
I
just
was
me.
being a shitwad.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That was me it's just a very vulnerable place to go in that process. And it's only gotten more vulnerable I've only gotten more vulnerable. And hopefully that still happens. Hopefully I'm always struggling and having a hard time with something,
Yeah.
you know?
That leads to growth.
Exactly. And I didn't always view it that way, but, you know, like over my span of recovery, it's like you were talking about with trauma. I mean, it's starting off, like the biggest problem is that I can't stop thinking about alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I, you know, have one drink, I don't know what's going to happen to me. And then it leads into, you know, the way that I'm eating, the way that I'm hurting myself on purpose, the way that I'm, you know, the thoughts that are in my mind constantly about how I'm not good and I'm not going to make it and I'm not, you know, people don't like me and all of that. Like I'm getting to, and I'm still in a place now, you know, where there is something that is spiritually unwell that I'm noticing far more than other things. That awareness that comes out of being in a spiritual state or in a process of following my higher power's lead. It's just surreal because I had no lead when I was drinking, and quite frankly, from the beginning, you know, until I was shown how to pray, how to meditate, how to look at myself non-judgmentally and honestly. That did not cross my mind. It did not cross my mind that I could ever be this free.
I had no idea. You know, I had no idea what recovery was going to look like, what it was going to feel like, or the freedom that I would feel, and just the faith or the trust that I would have. Like, you know, like I said, these periods I've gone through in my sobriety that were rough, like there's plenty more of them than what I've said, but the more of them I go through, the more faith I have that God's going to carry me through it again. Like, it can come to a point now where I have no money in my bank account. You know, I've gone through periods where I'm broke, like overdraft, scrounged up money to go cover it. Cause stupid stuff. Cause like I spent too much money on credit cards or like some dumb shit.
Yeah.
But then like the fear is not there anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I know that I haven't always made the best financial decisions in recovery, and I'm doing better off now than I have previously. But I've been at places where like I was broke and had ultimate faith that God was going to give me what I needed when I needed it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the money would hit the account at just the right time for me to not catch a crazy overdraft fee or for my next bill to be paid. And since I've gotten sober, I've never not once gone without a place to lay my head at night. I've never skipped a meal that wasn't intentional. You know, I've never gone without the basic necessities. I've never been naked because I didn't have any more clothes to wear. Like every little thing that I've needed, God's provided along the way as long as I've tried to follow him. And that's what's so cool to me. This faith that I grew up hearing people talk about and hearing people practice that I never had any real grasp of is now a reality in my life.
Yeah.
And I also love what you said about the vulnerability part of it. I was having this conversation with my sister a couple weeks ago when I was back home about how sometimes I have a hard time like just having basic small talk with people because I have a lot of conversations like this where we're like sharing our shit and on a real deep, vulnerable level. And I find that it allows other people to be more vulnerable with me. Mm-hmm. Like when you've heard like, yeah, I did heroin, crashed my car, stole from my grandmother, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like somebody who might be struggling with something else feels like they can talk to me about it because how's the heroin junkie going to judge you for your anxiety or for whatever little thing that you've got going on? I shouldn't say little, not to belittle it, but whatever thing that you've got going on in your life. I found that I connect with people now on such a deeper level than I was ever able to before. Because before sobriety, it was just surface level. You know, we were just right there. Like, we're here, we're partying, woohoo. What are we going to do this weekend? What are we drinking? Oh, did you hit up the weed man? You know, like, it was nothing real. And now I have so many real friendships, real relationships with people in and out of recovery. And, you know, even people who don't necessarily know my whole recovery story. Like, I just have a different way of talking to people and dealing with people and a completely different level of empathy for what other people are struggling with.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing to me.
It is. And it's like, you know, no matter how much better my life gets, you know, I don't feel that and I hope that there will never be a time where I don't still have that inside of me, knowing what it's like wanting to die and constantly feeling out of place. The list goes on. You know, I can't forget those feelings.
Yeah, I don't ever want that to leave me.
No, I don't. And I certainly, you know, I know that my alcoholism is going to want me at times to want to be normal and be able to drink normally and able to go on with my life normally. But I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't. And I don't regret being in recovery now. I don't regret anything I've done. I mean, it was wrong.
Oh, yeah.
I'm able to say, and I've said to many people, like, my behavior was wrong. But I'm more so now, I'm grateful for the people that let me have that experience, that let me hurt them, so that I can now see that back as an example of what I don't want to be.
Absolutely.
And what I don't want to do anymore.
People look at you crazy when I say, like, yeah, I'm really grateful that I got on heroin.
Right.
It's like, that's some wild shit to say.
Yeah.
But I would not be the person that I am today if I had just, like, graduated high school, went to college, never had a substance abuse problem, like maybe drank a little like a normal person. Like, the level of empathy that it's given me, the level of faith that it's given me, the relationships that I've been able to rebuild, like all of these blessings in my life and the person that I am today are directly correlated with the journey that I had to walk through to get up to this point. Like, I wouldn't go back and change any of it. Like, do I wish that I hadn't stolen from my grandmother while she had dementia? Like, yeah, I don't wish that I had done that. I'm not happy about that. But at this point, I wouldn't want to change any of it because today I am happy with who I am. That was something I could never do. Like, before getting sober, I didn't like looking in the mirror. I did not like the man who looked back at me. Yeah. And I can look in the mirror today. Like, I like who I am. And for the most part, I don't give a damn if you like who I am or not. And that's a really big deal for somebody like me because I was always so worried about what everybody else thought of me. And your opinion of me was way more valuable to me than my opinion of me. And, like, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Me either. I think this is a good place to stop. All right.
Well, I kind of talked like all through your story. We didn't get to a whole lot of that.
I threw my pieces in. I threw my parts.
You got me running my mouth. Here I am talking for a whole hour.
If we start on these topics, we're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah.
We're gonna need you to do some cute, like 10 more minutes, you know. We'll work on that next time. Anyways, thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to us tonight, or whenever you are listening to us. We're always wearing Whiskey and Milk t-shirts. I've paired mine with some cute pants, and Adam is wearing a new t-shirt.
Yeah, new design that dropped earlier this week. If you're a jam band fan or a Deadhead, grateful I'm not dead. Find us at whiskeymilk.com. We'll see you guys next week.
Attention, now arriving at your destination. The last house on the block.